Welcome to Apostolic Bible College's Christian Counseling, Ministry 403. This is Lesson 11, Understanding Christian Perspectives on Homosexuality. By the time you finish this lesson, you will be able to explain the cultural and historical shifts in societal attitudes toward homosexuality, to articulate the theological foundations, to evaluate rhetorical language and framing commonly used in discussions of homosexuality, to apply a shepherding approach to counseling, and to distinguish between identity and behavior within a Christian counseling framework. In preparation for this lesson, you should read Talking to Your Church About Homosexuality. This document is produced by the conservative Christian organization Focus on the Family, whom we've mentioned in a previous lesson. Text for this lesson identifies a monumental shift in cultural attitudes towards homosexuality over the past 40 to 50 years. The church has faced challenges adapting to these societal changes. The depth of these societal and cultural changes is culture dependent. In the West, homosexuality is beyond accepted. It is applauded. Some would congratulate the homosexual for being brave enough to come out to the world. Traditional theological frameworks are being questioned by what the document terms gay revisionist theologians. Historically, Christianity emerged in a Greco-Roman world with sexual norms very different from what later Western societies often assume, and early Christian teaching stood out as distinctly countercultural. Rather than being merely restrictive, Christian sexual ethics reframed sexuality around holiness, mutuality, and the dignity of the body. Adultery, concubines, prostitutes as a form of worship, pederasty, that is, adult men with adolescent boys, and sex with slaves, all were accepted practices. In none of these cases did the person identify with these practices. They were rather something that they did, not who they were. Christianity's sexual ethics became counterculture and subversive to the Greco-Roman norms. Today, churches now represent the more traditional position of sexual morality, exclusive monogamy, and rejection of sexual exploitation compared to the broader social acceptance broadly labeled sexual freedom. You might want to stop the presentation here and read Genesis chapters 1 through 3, which is the basis for our theological foundations. God created humans here, male and female, in His divine image, and marriage is described as a bringing together two halves of humanity. Marriage is portrayed as exclusive, monogamous, and lifelong. Your document for this text frames homosexuality as one of many expressions of broken, sinful humanity. Stop the presentation now again and read Romans 1, 18 through 32. The things I want you to take away from this scripture is that God's wrath is revealed against suppressed truth. It is not arbitrary, but directed toward humanity's deliberate suppression of the truth about him, even though his power and divine nature are clearly revealed through creation. Humanity's fundamental sin is exchanging the glory of the immortal God for created things, which leads to disordered worship and idolatry, and sets the stage for moral corruption. 3 times, Paul makes the statement that deeply frightens me: God gave them over. God allows people to experience the consequences of their chosen rebellion. Their sexual behaviors described are presented as evidence of a prior rejection of God, as symptoms of a mind and heart turned away from the Creator. Finally, the passage ends in a broad catalog of sins. Not only does humanity practice evil, but often approves of it. All people therefore stand in need of God's saving righteousness. When I mentioned your reading, I purposely identified the document as belonging to a conservative Christian organization. If you've already taken my class in hermeneutics, you know that we rely only on Scripture for our doctrine, not on traditions. The document uses some rhetoric like broken, sinful, and falls short to describe homosexuality. It poses the conservative Christian view as truth and alternative interpretations as twisted logic. This is somewhat contrary to the other message, encouraging pastors to speak with kindness and grace. I want to point out that there is some language that may be appropriate for the pulpit, but inappropriate for the counseling office and for a person seeking answers and help about confusing, difficult feelings they may be having. When one of my daughters was little, they said something unkind about someone to her mother and me. I knew they had come to a point where they needed to learn that just because something is true doesn't mean we speak it out loud. Pastoral counseling requires that we choose our words carefully, nouthetically approaching the sin, but drawing them to truth in love. Proverbs 18:19 is entirely appropriate. A brother offended is more unyielding than a strong city, and quarreling is like the bars of a castle. The document also poses that the cultural shift of sexual immorality in general and homosexuality in particular that are associated with the breakdown of marriage and family. And marriage is the most important social justice issue of our time, framing this as an attack on our religious freedom. And I can see this as being important for the pastor in the pulpit to understand these issues this way. After all, the Great Commission tells us to go into all the world and run for office. Oh, wait, I have that wrong. It's go into all the world and march on the Capitol. I'm not sure civic engagement and political action is required of a shepherd guiding his flock, of the counselor in an office with a troubled young person, of a grieving mother or father dealing with the issues of a wayward child. Prayer and fasting and focusing your efforts on the little lambs will have a greater and more long-lasting effect on this world. Remember 2 Corinthians 10, 4 through 5. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. So how should we then address homosexuality, both proactively and reactively? The document advocates that we lay a solid foundation of theological teaching, address homosexuality specifically, though not in every sermon, model humility, kindness, and grace while maintaining theological positions. Be merciful to those who doubt. Save others by snatching them from the fire. To others show mercy, mixed with fear, hating even the clothing stained by corrupted flesh, according to Jude 1, 22 through 23. Encourage congregation members to reach out with kindness. John 13:35. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. And then finally, create support systems within the church. Or what I said earlier in the lesson, that while sexual behaviors we would label as abhorrent by today's standards were considered the norm in the ancient Greco-Roman world, there is no evidence that they found identity in these behaviors. It's important that we distinguish between identity, attraction, and behavior. We reject the concept of sexual orientation as being innate, both theologically as well as psychologically and sociologically. It just doesn't fit the science. Our message to the counselee should be clear. Same-sex attractions don't define you. You weren't born gay, nor did you choose your sexual desires. You don't have to act on attractions. Change from homosexuality, like change from any sin, isn't instantaneous.